Glacier National Park, Montana. A place of staggering beauty where mountains scrape the sky and glaciers glisten like shards of glass under the sun. But for one couple, this majestic wilderness would become the stage for a disappearance that defied logic, shattered families, and left investigators bewildered for years. Their names were Andrew and Claire Bennett. Married just 3 years, the Bennetts were both teachers from Missoula who shared a passion for hiking, photography, and escaping into the wild. In July of 2017, they set out on what was supposed to be a short weekend camping trip on the popular Hidden Lake Trail. They never returned. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. Tell me in the comments from which city and country you're watching this video. I'd love to know, and we'll be leaving a heart on your message. And don't forget to subscribe and hit like. It really helps us reach our goal of 1,000 likes. Now, let's go back to the trail. It was a Saturday morning, July 15th, when the Bennetts arrived at Logan Pass. The weather was clear, the trail was buzzing with summer hikers, and they checked in at the visitor center before heading out. Claire texted her sister at 10:43 a.m. saying, "We just started hiking. This place is unreal." That would be the last message anyone ever received from her. When the couple didn't return home by Monday, family members alerted authorities. A search team was dispatched immediately, aided by helicopters, dogs, and dozens of park rangers. What they found, or didn't find, was the first chilling clue. Nothing. No tracks, no torn tents, no signs of wildlife struggle, no dropped gear. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed them whole. The initial theory was that they might have fallen off a cliff or gotten lost off trail. But experts argued that the Hidden Lake Trail is well marked, and both Andrew and Claire were experienced hikers. They carried GPS, extra water, and survival gear. Their route was not supposed to take more than 4 hours. Over the next 2 weeks, over 150 people scoured the area. Drones were flown, lake beds were dragged, and even cadaver dogs were brought in. Yet not a single trace of the couple was uncovered. No clothing, no gear, not even a footprint. The National Park Service eventually suspended the official search, but their families never stopped looking. Claire's sister, Emily, turned into a tireless advocate, appearing on news programs, organizing awareness campaigns, and keeping the case alive online. Andrew's parents hired private investigators, one of whom proposed a strange theory. What if they had never left the trail? What if someone or something had intercepted them? But there was no evidence of foul play, no blood, no witnesses, and no reports of suspicious activity. Just silence. 6 years would pass. The world moved on. The trails filled again with hikers and tourists. But in the summer of 2023, an off-season forest fire swept through a section of Glacier Park that had been previously inaccessible. After the fire, a small cleanup team came across something unusual near a creek bed. A metal water bottle, half buried in ash and soot, sealed tightly. Inside was a folded piece of paper. The words scribbled on it would reignite the case and send shockwaves through the families and investigators. But before anyone could read them, the note had to be authenticated. Who wrote it? When? And how did it survive for 6 years in the wilderness? For the first time in years, there was a lead. One small enough to fit inside a bottle, but heavy enough to crack open 6 years of mystery. The discovery of the bottle stunned everyone involved in the Bennett case. After 6 years of agonizing silence, a single object, charred but intact, emerged from the ashes like a ghost reaching out from the past. The bottle was found by a seasonal park worker named Marcus Greer, who had been clearing debris from a dry creek bed about a mile off the Hidden Lake Trail. He described spotting the bottle sticking out from blackened soil like it didn't belong there. When Marcus picked it up, he saw the metal was scorched, but the cap was still tightly sealed. Inside, protected from moisture, was a scrap of folded notebook paper. He didn't dare open it. Instead, he radioed his supervisor immediately. That single, cautious decision may have preserved the first real clue in a 6-year mystery. The bottle was handed over to the National Park Service and then quickly transferred to the FBI field office in Helena for proper handling and forensic analysis. While they waited for lab results, word of the discovery spread fast. Local news outlets ran the story. Bottle found in Glacier may hold clue to 2017 disappearance. For the Bennett's families, hope surged and fear returned in equal measure. Could this be real? Could it finally lead to answers, or just reopen old wounds? Claire's sister Emily flew from Seattle to Montana the next morning. She stood outside the ranger station where the bottle had first arrived and gave a short statement to reporters. "We've waited so long. If this note is from Claire or Andrew, we just want to know the truth." Behind closed doors, the FBI analysts got to work. They photographed the bottle, dusted it for prints, and finally opened it in a controlled environment. The paper was fragile but legible. It contained 5 short lines, handwritten in black ink, dated July 15, 2017, the exact day the couple went missing. The note read, "To whoever finds this, we're trapped, injured, North Fork past dead tree. Please hurry. Claire." The handwriting matched known samples from Claire's journals with 93% certainty. There were no fingerprints on the paper, likely due to moisture and time, but the message itself was enough to reignite a full-scale search. Investigators zoomed in on the North Fork past dead tree reference. It was vague, but it gave them something to work with: direction, movement, location. Satellite imagery was pulled, old search maps were reopened, and a new team assembled to explore terrain that hadn't been searched since 2017. They weren't just looking for remains anymore. They were trying to retrace a desperate path that 2 people may have taken in their final hours. But one thing troubled officials. If the bottle had been dropped in 2017, how had no one found it sooner? That creek bed had been dry most summers. Some believed it was covered by debris until the fire cleared the area. Others wondered if the bottle had been moved, placed more recently. Had someone found it years ago and never reported it? Or was it something even stranger? Meanwhile, local volunteers returned to Glacier, moved by the story. Rangers coordinated small teams to check ravines, crevices, and shallow cave systems. One volunteer brought a rescue dog trained to detect decomposing human scent. Days passed, then weeks. Still nothing. No bones, no gear, no trace. Just a haunting note in Claire's handwriting, left like a whisper in the wild. The families clung to the message like a lifeline, but even it raised more questions than answers. Were they really injured? How far had they made it? And what happened after the note was written? As Glacier's summer haze settled over the mountains once more, it became clear the forest had given up one secret, but it was still holding many more. The renewed search focused heavily on a specific section of the North Fork area, known for its twisting streams, uneven ridges, and dense undergrowth. Teams were deployed with GPS trackers and high-resolution aerial drones, attempting to visualize where Claire and Andrew might have gone after writing the note. The dead tree mentioned in the message became an eerie landmark they were all desperate to find. Rangers reviewed thousands of photographs from 2017's original search and even consulted forestry databases to identify likely locations where old-growth trees may have fallen before the couple vanished. Some volunteers traveled from out of state just to help. One man, a retired forest firefighter, said he felt a personal pull to the case. "This isn't just a disappearance," he told a local journalist. "It's a story that keeps reaching out to us." Meanwhile, back at the Glacier National Park headquarters, forensic linguists continued to dissect the note. The writing seemed rushed but deliberate. There were no spelling errors, no smudges. Analysts pointed out that using North Fork past Dead Tree might suggest Claire had prior hiking knowledge, or that she and Andrew had mapped their trail before it all went wrong. This raised another question. If they had a plan and knew the terrain, what could have gone so catastrophically wrong? Digging into the couple's past for the 100th time, journalists found themselves revisiting their last known social media post. A photo of Claire and Andrew smiling in front of Hidden Lake. The caption read, "One last trail before we disappear into each other." At the time it was sweet. Now it felt chilling. Every detail took on new weight. Experts theorized that if they had gotten injured and tried to signal for help, perhaps the note was just one of several attempts. But what if there were more messages, more bottles? Rangers began examining logs of all found objects in Glacier over the last decade. Most items were discarded as litter or lost hiker gear. Could something have been missed? At the same time, search dogs began reacting to a particular ravine about 2 miles from the newly marked zone. It was steep, shadowed even at noon, and choked with boulders and fallen trees. The soil was loose, making it dangerous to navigate. Still, the team pressed in. On the second day of exploration, a volunteer tripped on something just under the dirt. It was metal, an old hiking pole, the kind Andrew was known to use. Its grip was half-rotted, but initials scratched into the side read AB. It had been underground for years. Hope flared again. Investigators marked the location and began carefully digging by hand. They found scraps of fabric nearby, possibly from a backpack or jacket. But the terrain made progress slow. Every movement risked a landslide or injury. The site was treated with caution, flagged as potentially significant. But even with the discovery, doubts lingered. Was this truly where the couple had ended up, or had the current pushed the gear downhill during one of the spring melts? One FBI profiler who joined the case in its later years believed something darker had occurred. "There's something off," he said in an interview. "I don't think they just got lost. I think they ran into someone, or something they weren't supposed to." That theory had floated quietly in the background since 2017. A few hikers had gone missing near the same zone in the 1990s. Others had reported strange sounds, distant voices, and even seeing lights at night where no campsites existed. Though dismissed as imagination or wilderness illusions, those stories resurfaced now with renewed curiosity. Was it possible the couple encountered someone else in the forest? Someone who didn't want to be found? Whatever the truth, it still lay buried in the underbrush, waiting to be uncovered. The further they explored the ravine where Andrew's hiking pole had been found, the more the searchers felt something wasn't right. There was an unnatural stillness, even for Glacier's remote backcountry. No birds, no wind, just the quiet crunch of boots on damp earth. The volunteer who first uncovered the pole, a Montana native named Ellis, said later he felt like he had stepped into a place that didn't want to be disturbed. The discovery of the pole had reignited hope, but also intensified the mystery. If Andrew had been there, where was Claire? And why had they not tried to climb back up toward the trail? A small team from the National Park Service set up temporary camp near the ravine's edge, determined to spend several days combing the area thoroughly. Ground-penetrating radar was brought in, though the rocky terrain made readings difficult. The dogs returned and again signaled near the same cluster of trees where the pole was found. One even began pawing at the soil, whining. The team began digging carefully, using brushes and wooden tools to avoid damaging anything buried beneath. Within hours, they unearthed a torn piece of cloth with a faded floral pattern. Claire's sister would later confirm it looked like the bandana Claire always wore tied around her wrist. It was damp, decayed, but recognizable. The cloth was found wedged between rocks, as though it had been dropped or snagged, while someone was climbing or crawling through the ravine. But there was no body, no bag, no shoes. Just another fragment of presence, without resolution. Back in Kalispell, the community watched the updates with a mix of sorrow and unease. A candlelight vigil was held in front of the local courthouse, where neighbors gathered with photos of Claire and Andrew and held hands in silence. The park had always been a place of pride for Montana locals, but now it was shadowed by mystery. Some blamed the terrain, others whispered about something else living in the wilderness, old local legends about off-the-grid recluses and unexplained disappearances that dated back to the 1970s. None of it could be proven, but the rumors refused to die. Meanwhile, the message in the bottle continued to be examined. A new expert in ink aging and paper degradation concluded that it was almost certainly written in 2017, matching the timeline of the couple's disappearance. The ink, exposed to moisture inside the corked bottle, had faded slightly, but was still legible. That alone seemed miraculous. But one curious detail emerged. The writing appeared to be Claire's. Comparing with old birthday cards and personal notes, analysts were reasonably confident the note came from her hand. That small fact pierced through the mystery with something raw and emotional. Claire had survived long enough to write that note. She had been alive, conscious, and coherent, and she had believed there was a chance someone might find it. Claire's parents, long resigned to the worst, were shaken. Her mother, Janine, gave a rare public statement to the press. Through tears, she said, "I don't know what happened out there, but she was trying to get home. That's all I know. And I want the world to remember her as someone who didn't give up." In response, the search was expanded once more. The park's administration allowed a wider zone to be surveyed, even though it meant pulling rangers from other duties. Drones were flown over unexplored valleys. Heat maps were used to detect anomalies beneath the canopy. A new theory began to circulate. What if Claire had become separated from Andrew and tried to find help on her own? Perhaps she had written the message, tossed the bottle downstream, and continued on, but never made it out. That single, fragile note was now the only direct communication anyone had from either of them since 2017. It was both a clue and a cry for help, lost in time. As the summer sun filtered through the tall pine canopy, the search teams pushed deeper into the backcountry. Every crackle of leaves, every shift in the wind, felt like it might reveal something, anything, about what happened to Claire and Andrew. Most of the original crew had rotated out, but a new team of younger rangers and volunteers took up the mantle with fresh urgency. Fueled by the emotional weight of the message in the bottle, they felt they were chasing more than a mystery. They were chasing the last known trace of two real people who had vanished without a goodbye. A satellite team, equipped with thermal imaging drones, made several low passes over an area roughly 7 miles east of the original campsite. On the third flyover, one drone picked up a cold anomaly, an unusually flat patch of earth near a dry riverbed. The soil appeared disturbed. A few faint outlines suggested it could have once been a shelter or perhaps a hastily assembled camp. Investigators on the ground took 2 days to reach the site, navigating thick brush, shifting rocks, and remnants of old animal dens. When they finally arrived, they found what appeared to be a shallow fire pit, long since washed over with sediment and leaves. Nearby, half buried under moss and dirt, was a rusted zipper pull, too small for a sleeping bag, more likely from a backpack. The brand matched a model Andrew was known to own back in 2016. The discovery raised more questions than answers. If the couple had reached that far, why hadn't they signaled for help? They were within a few miles of an emergency ranger post. Though without GPS or maps, those miles could have felt like 1,000. The torn map in the glove box, which had sparked the reopening of the case, showed faint markings in pencil, possibly indicating potential hiking trails. One of those marks led directly toward the area where the zipper was found, as if they had been trying to escape the forest by forging their own path. The couple's families clung to the hope that these were breadcrumbs. evidence that Claire and Andrew had done everything they could to survive, but others in the community began whispering darker theories. A local blogger who had been following the case suggested the possibility that someone else had been in the forest that summer, someone who didn't want them to leave. He pointed out that multiple hikers had reported strange noises in that region for years, low murmurs, the snapping of branches when no one was there, even the feeling of being watched. Rangers dismissed these stories as paranoia brought on by isolation. Still, the rumors refused to die. On the 6th day of exploring the anomaly zone, one of the volunteers noticed something caught in the roots of a downed tree. A piece of synthetic rope, partially frayed, tangled tightly. It didn't match any equipment used by the search team. The texture and color suggested it had been there for years, exposed to sun and rain. Tied around the rope was a knot, often used for emergency fastening, suggesting someone may have tried to build shelter or tie off a pack, or worse, prevent someone from moving. The forest, which once seemed vast and peaceful, now felt haunted by unspoken questions. As the evidence mounted, a new profile began to form, not of a simple hiking accident, but a prolonged, desperate survival attempt. Maybe Claire and Andrew had made it further than anyone thought. Maybe they had separated, each hoping to find help, or maybe someone else had been with them. In private, some investigators began re-examining missing persons cases from the same area, checking for overlap, patterns, or any prior signs of foul play that might have been overlooked. Whatever had happened, it wasn't just an accident anymore. The forest had stories to tell, and after 6 long years, it was finally starting to speak. The deeper the search team ventured, the more the forest seemed to change character. What was once scenic and serene now felt heavy with tension. The trees stood taller, thicker, as if trying to hide secrets in their shadows. The air turned cooler, and even the birdsong began to fade. A ranger named Elena, who had spent over a decade in Glacier's backcountry, whispered to a colleague that the forest felt off, as if they were walking into someone else's territory. On the 7th day, while clearing brush near the base of a steep slope, a volunteer stumbled on something partially buried under rocks. It was a plastic ID sleeve, cracked and yellowed, with the remnants of a faded photograph and a name tag. The name, Claire Morton. The sleeve had once been attached to a park pass, likely kept in a front pocket or hanging from a backpack. The image was too faded to confirm the face, but the handwriting on the back matched Claire's, verified by her sister, who had kept letters from her over the years. This was the first undeniable piece of personal evidence since the bottle. The find electrified the team. This wasn't speculation or a clue open to interpretation. This was Claire. She had made it at least this far. But the location where it was found raised new concerns. It wasn't near a trail. It wasn't even near the anomaly zone. It was miles away, down a slope no hiker would willingly descend. Some speculated she had fallen, others wondered if she had fled. The ID sleeve had been wedged under jagged rocks, suggesting it had been there for years, preserved only by the shade and cold. They flagged the area for further investigation and called in specialists from Missoula to examine the surrounding soil and terrain. That night, the campsite was unusually quiet. The search team, typically full of hopeful energy, sat around the fire, exchanging glances instead of stories. One younger volunteer asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. If Claire made it that far, where's Andrew? The next morning, a storm rolled in, brief but intense. Lightning cracked the sky, and heavy rain drenched the forest floor. As the crew took shelter in emergency tents, several small landslides were reported on the upper ridges. When the storm cleared, they received word that one such landslide had exposed what appeared to be a decades-old fire pit on a hilltop nearby. When the team hiked to the site, they found blackened stones arranged in a deliberate circle, partially collapsed. Inside the circle was a partially melted tin can, the label long gone. It had been opened with a jagged edge, not a can opener. Next to it, the rusted remains of a spoon. A quiet fell over the group. Whoever had built this fire had stayed here long enough to eat, alone or otherwise. No bones, no clothing, just a silent testimony to survival. Some investigators began to theorize that Claire and Andrew had become separated early on, perhaps after an argument or a misstep. Others believed Andrew might have stayed behind due to injury, encouraging Claire to go ahead. The tone of her message in the bottle, panicked, desperate, suddenly made more sense. She might have been alone when she wrote it, calling out to anyone, to anything, for rescue. Back at the temporary HQ, investigators laid out all the newly recovered evidence on a table. The zipper pull, the rope, the ID sleeve, the makeshift fire pit. A pattern was beginning to form, but the image remained blurry. It was like piecing together a puzzle without knowing the final picture. The deeper they went into this forest, the more they found. But the further away, the truth seemed to drift. And then, just before dusk, a radio call came in. One of the rangers had found something new, something buried just inches below the soil, in a clearing surrounded by silence. The call over the radio was short, but the tone in the ranger's voice was urgent. Within 20 minutes, a team of 4 reached the small clearing described, barely 100 feet across, surrounded by dense lodgepole pines that blocked most of the sun. In the center, under a layer of wet pine needles and loamy soil, the ranger had uncovered a strange object. At first glance, it looked like a leather-bound notebook, but as the team gently cleaned it off, they realized it was a weathered travel journal. The front cover was torn, and many of the pages were stuck together from years of moisture, but the ink had held. The first legible page was dated June 18, 2006, the day Claire and Andrew began their hike. Gasps filled the air as they realized this journal belonged to Andrew. It wasn't just a tourist memento. It was a near-daily log of their experience, written in tight, careful handwriting. The early entries were filled with joy. Claire made me laugh so hard I dropped my trail mix, and we found the perfect place to camp under the stars. But as the pages turned, the mood began to shift. On June 22nd, Andrew wrote about Claire spraining her ankle near a creek crossing. He debated turning back, but they decided to rest a day and continue slowly. The next few entries became increasingly fragmented. Mentions of strange sounds at night, missing food, a comment about their GPS malfunctioning, and then came a chilling entry dated June 25th. We saw someone, or something, watching from the ridge. Claire thought it was a deer. I'm not sure. After that, the entries turned frantic. On June 26th, Claire disappeared for 2 hours. Found her sitting near the river, confused. Says she heard music. There's no one out here. The final legible entry, dated June 28th, was just a single sentence, scrawled across the page. If anyone finds this, we're not alone out here. The team stared at each other in silence. This wasn't just a case of 2 lost hikers. It hinted at something more, something unexplainable. They packaged the journal carefully and rushed it to the temporary HQ. The sheriff's department was called in again, along with a local historian, familiar with indigenous legends and older park records. Word spread quickly, and theories began to fly. Some referenced the Whistling Man stories, old legends among Blackfeet elders about a spirit that lured travelers with sound. Others brought up an unconfirmed report from 1981 when a pair of hikers claimed they were followed by a presence for 2 days and had heard distant humming at night. Those hikers had survived, but they'd never returned to Glacier. Still, the journal posed more questions than answers. If Andrew had been writing up until June 28th, that meant they'd survived over 10 days in the wilderness. But why no further signs? Why had Claire written the bottle message alone? Had they split up by then? And most importantly, who or what was watching them from the ridge? The discovery of the journal reignited media attention. News vans arrived at the trailhead. Reporters camped out, hoping for a glimpse of new findings. Families of other missing hikers reached out, wondering if their loved ones had encountered the same force. Claire's sister, Emily, released a statement. "We never stopped believing. Now, we just want the truth." The next morning, search teams expanded the radius by another 2 miles. Specialists began scanning for underground anomalies, caves, old mining shafts, even sinkholes. But as they dug deeper into the forest, the landscape grew more unforgiving. Strange things started happening. Radios cut out without explanation. Footsteps were heard, but never matched to anyone. And one ranger reported seeing movement in the trees, only to find nothing when he investigated. The deeper they searched, the more it felt like something didn't want to be found. Then as dusk fell on the 12th day of renewed searching, a search dog began barking furiously near a cluster of fallen trees. When the team cleared the area, they found something sticking out from the earth. It was smooth, round, and pale. It looked like bone. The discovery sent an icy jolt through the entire team. As they cleared more soil away, it became unmistakably clear. They had found a partial human skeleton. The bones were not scattered as if dragged by animals, but placed with eerie care beneath a lattice of branches and moss. The upper half of the skeleton was mostly intact. The skull was resting sideways, the jaw slightly open, as if frozen mid-sentence. A rusted wedding band still clung to the ring finger of the left hand. The initials inside were faint, but when examined under a magnifying glass, they read A.H. It was Andrew. No one spoke for several minutes. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. Rangers cordoned off the area while forensic experts began the painstaking process of cataloguing the remains. But something else was found, tucked inside the chest cavity, wrapped in faded plastic and sealed with waterproof tape. It was a small cassette recorder, the kind you'd find in an old dictation machine. Miraculously, though dirty and aged, the tape was intact. It was rushed to the lab while the rest of the body was prepared for transport. That night, a silence hung heavy over the base camp. Even the most seasoned rangers didn't sleep well. The next morning, the audio from the tape was played back for a handful of officials and Claire's family. The voice was unmistakably Andrew's, tired, ragged, and barely above a whisper. "Day? I don't know. Claire hasn't spoken since yesterday. She just stares. The noises. They don't stop. Whistling. Always whistling. No trail left. I think they move it. The forest moves." There was a pause. Then static. Then more frantic words. "If anyone hears this, don't look in the trees. Don't follow the lights. Stay on the path." The tape ended with a long rustling sound, followed by a single word. "Run." By noon, the FBI was notified. The presence of possible human interference, or something far worse, couldn't be dismissed anymore. Journalists caught wind of the recording and speculation exploded. Podcasts dissected Andrew's words. Paranormal investigators proposed that the Glacier Trail lay over a thin spot between worlds. Others believed Andrew had simply gone mad from isolation and exposure. But then came the final blow, Andrew's autopsy. He hadn't died from starvation or cold. He had suffered a crushed windpipe, and forensic analysis showed pressure consistent with strangulation. Someone or something had killed him. Claire's fate remained unknown, but now the urgency doubled. Search teams began focusing on potential locations where she might have hidden, injured, or disoriented. Psychics reached out, claiming to feel her energy near water. Locals began to speak out about things they'd always dismissed. Shadows on the ridgeline, hikers turning back for no clear reason, or a strange hum at dusk that never matched any bird. All of it pointed to one chilling truth. Andrew and Claire had seen something they were never meant to. Meanwhile, national attention soared. News stations debated whether the case was criminal, supernatural, or simply tragic. The Park Service was under pressure to shut down the entire trail, but officials hesitated. There was still hope that Claire might be alive. Deep in the woods, one searcher stopped abruptly by a riverbank. He thought he saw a flicker of blue fabric wedged between two rocks downstream. He radioed it in, heart pounding. Another team nearby confirmed visual on what appeared to be clothing. As they pulled the soaked fabric from the water, a name was stitched on the inside of the jacket collar, Claire Thompson. It was her coat, and wedged deep in one of the pockets, wrapped in a Ziploc bag, was a crumpled photograph. Claire and Andrew, smiling at the trailhead, unaware they were stepping into the heart of something that would haunt the region for years to come. The photograph in Claire's jacket pocket was worn, but the image was still clear enough to make out their smiles. The couple standing beside the Glacier Trail sign, backpacks full and optimism radiating. That photo had never been released publicly. It wasn't among the images submitted by the family nor shared with the media during the initial search, which meant Claire must have kept it with her all along. The fact that it was tucked safely in a sealed bag suggested she had been lucid enough to preserve it. Hope surged again. If she had protected the photo, maybe she had found other ways to survive. Forensic teams examined the coat and confirmed it had been exposed to the elements for at least several years, but had only recently washed down into the riverbank. That implied it had been stored or hidden somewhere else until recent weather dislodged it. All theories now pointed to one disturbing possibility. Claire had been alive for some time after Andrew's death. The discovery reignited the search, but with a new strategy. Investigators mapped out caves, abandoned ranger stations, and deep crevices that could serve as shelter. They brought in scent-tracking dogs, but the trail was long cold. Still, there was another breakthrough. On the back of the photo, scribbled in faint ink, were numbers, coordinates. They pointed to a ravine miles from where Andrew's remains had been found. A team was dispatched immediately. When they reached the location, it was as if the forest itself was trying to keep them out. Overgrown branches, loose rocks, and sudden fog made the descent treacherous. But hours later they found what could only be described as a makeshift shelter, logs arranged into a lean-to, covered in thick moss and earth. Inside were the remains of a fire pit, charred bones of small animals, and an old tin cup. A pair of worn hiking boots sat neatly beside a sleeping bag. On the interior wall of the lean-to, words were carved into the wood. I waited. I tried. I'm sorry. The handwriting matched Claire's journal entries, and just below the final word was a crude drawing, a bottle floating in water. It was the same symbol that had been etched onto the bottle found near the lake. Claire had sent the message. She had been alive when she released it. The team scoured the area for any additional signs, but there were none. No body, no bones, just silence and the lingering presence of someone who had struggled to hold on. Claire had survived the unimaginable for weeks or maybe months, all while mourning Andrew and navigating a wilderness that had already claimed so much. Back at the station, the message in the bottle was analyzed again. Traces of DNA confirmed it was Claire's. Experts dated the ink and paper. It had been written approximately 4 years prior, meaning she may have lived for 2 years after their disappearance. The implications were devastating. Her family, stunned, now had to reckon with the possibility that Claire had died alone, still waiting to be found. Or worse, that she had left the area entirely and was still out there, somewhere, possibly hiding. Public interest surged. The story trended nationally. The Glacier Trail couple became a household phrase. Theories flooded in, some realistic, others fantastical. Had she been taken? Had she escaped and lost her memory? Was she living under a new identity? The park rangers remained cautious, issuing no definitive statement. But one thing was certain, the bottle had changed everything. The image of Claire's handwriting, the haunting words carved into wood, and the crude map drawn on the back of a photograph now formed a trail of their own. A trail leading deeper into mystery than anyone had expected. News crews flooded into Montana, setting up just outside Glacier National Park. Everyone wanted to capture a glimpse of the lean-to shelter or the recovered items. But authorities had cordoned off the area, allowing access only to forensic specialists. Public pressure was mounting. People wanted answers. What happened to Claire? Why had she sent that message? And why now? Investigators released a timeline. Claire and Andrew had vanished in 2006. The message in the bottle had likely been released around 2012. And now, in 2023, it had finally surfaced. The gap was haunting. A documentary crew secured exclusive access to Claire's family and began piecing together a narrative that was equal parts romantic tragedy and survival thriller. Interviews with former rangers, survivalists, and behavioral psychologists painted a picture of a woman who may have fought to stay alive despite overwhelming odds. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the investigation turned to an unmarked cabin about 30 miles south of the shelter site. An old park ranger, now retired, had come forward anonymously, claiming he once saw a woman matching Claire's description around 2009. She was alone, gaunt, and carrying a makeshift bag. He said he offered her food and water, but she refused and walked off without speaking. At the time, he thought she might have been a lost hiker. Now he wasn't so sure. Search teams returned to that area, focusing on caves, creeks, and high ridges. And then they found it, an old rusted camping stove tucked inside a small alcove beneath an overhang. Next to it was a weathered journal. The pages were brittle and many had been lost to time, but the remaining entries were unmistakably Claire's. Her handwriting, her tone. It was her voice echoing through time. The first entries were hopeful. She talked about Andrew, about trying to find help. Then came the ones filled with fear. I haven't seen another person in days. I think I went in circles. The sound at night is louder now. Something is out there. That last sentence appeared multiple times, underlined. The journal turned from a record of survival into something more fragmented, possibly the result of hunger, dehydration, or trauma. One entry simply read, "The forest watches, it remembers." Another showed a drawing of a storm drain with a circle around it. No one could quite explain that detail. Why a storm drain? There were none nearby. But that question would soon be answered. A separate team following the path of nearby creeks found a narrow tunnel used for flood runoff. Deep inside, lodged between roots and fallen rocks, was a piece of cloth, bright pink. DNA tests would later confirm it belonged to Claire. The tunnel eventually emptied near a rural access road, and near that road, under a pile of brush, another bottle was found. This one empty, sealed, but without a message. Investigators now believed Claire had attempted to send multiple bottles, hoping one would reach civilization. Each discovery brought her closer, but never quite close enough. The tragedy was unbearable. She had survived, left clues, screamed silently into the wilderness, and no one heard her. Claire's family stood before cameras days later, holding the photograph recovered from her jacket. She was brave, her sister said. She held on longer than anyone could have imagined, and she never stopped trying. The press conference ended with tears and silence. But the mystery didn't. Locals began reporting strange sightings again, figures in the woods, flickering lights at night, sounds that didn't belong. The park rangers, once dismissive, now took every report seriously. Because somewhere deep in the park's endless trails, a story had been left unfinished, and the bottle that reached the world was only part of what Claire had wanted to say. The bottle was never meant to be the end of Claire and Andrew's story, but rather a beginning. While the world focused on the heartbreaking messages she left behind, investigators were already quietly following a different trail, one that began not in the forest, but on a hard drive. A former guest of Glacier National Park, a hobby drone flyer named Kyle Morrigan, came forward with footage he'd taken in 2011. The drone video had never been published, just stored. He remembered seeing something odd near a cliffside edge, a flash of movement, something not quite animal. The footage showed a small figure crouched near a rock formation. Investigators slowed the frames and enhanced them. The shape, though blurry, resembled a person in tattered clothing. The location was more than 15 miles from the lean-to shelter. Search teams moved quickly. The area was remote, but not impossible to reach. What they found this time wasn't a shelter or a bottle. It was a gravesite, a shallow one, partially covered by debris and time. Forensics confirmed the remains belonged to Andrew. There were no visible injuries on the bones, no signs of violence. He had likely died of exposure or starvation. But why was he buried? And more importantly, by whom? Near the grave was a bundle wrapped in cloth, protected from the elements. Inside was Claire's scarf, a photograph of the two of them smiling during a picnic, and a third item no one expected, a small pocket knife with the initials CD carved into the handle. Claire had tried to leave a marker. Investigators now knew she had not only survived past Andrew's death, but had cared enough to bury him, honor him, and continue alone. The discovery crushed the remaining hope that Andrew might be alive. But it also deepened the admiration the public felt for Claire. She had endured the wilderness alone, suffered unimaginable loss, and still fought to be heard. But the most unexpected twist came just days later, when a local park maintenance worker cleaning a remote trailhead outhouse found something lodged inside the back wall, wedged behind a loose panel. It was a plastic bag sealed with duct tape. Inside, another note. "If this reaches you, I made it downriver. I'm heading toward the old ranger station." The handwriting was the same. The date, 2013. Claire had left more clues than anyone imagined. That station had burned down in 2015, but a crew was immediately dispatched to explore the ruins. The basement had collapsed, but under the rubble they found a pile of charred items, boots, a kettle, and what looked like a tin box. Inside the tin was a final photo, heavily damaged but intact enough to recognize Claire's face, frail, smiling faintly, holding up her hand in a gesture of peace. The image was haunting and beautiful. It was the last known photograph of Claire Donovan. Her body was never found. Searchers believe she likely perished near that ranger station, perhaps in a storm or due to injury, but her legacy had already taken root. Online communities sprang up sharing maps, timelines, decoding her writings. Artists painted murals of Claire in small towns across Montana. A scholarship was named in her honor for women in wilderness survival studies. And yet, the forest still held secrets. Some claimed to hear whispers near the waterfall where her first bottle was found. Others said they saw figures vanish between trees. Claire's story had become a legend, not just of loss, but of endurance. The woman who disappeared into Glacier National Park was never truly lost. She became part of it. The discovery of Claire's final photograph marked a quiet turning point in the investigation, but it didn't answer everything. In fact, it raised new and unsettling questions. For starters, why had no one seen her in the years following the 2013 note? If she truly made it to the old ranger station, how did she survive for that long undetected? The site was overgrown, but had once had running water, an emergency pantry, and even solar-powered lights before the fire gutted it. Had she lived there for months, perhaps years, while the world searched in the wrong direction? One item found in the tin box hinted at this possibility: a handmade calendar with dates marked off using soot. It ended in August 2014. 1 full year. Rangers theorized that she used scavenged supplies and maybe assistance from unknown hikers, though no reports supported this. But then came the most bizarre clue of all, a signature. On the back of the photograph was written in faint, shaky ink, "Still here, see." But the ink wasn't old. Lab analysis suggested the writing was made not in 2013 or 2014, but possibly as late as 2019. That was just a year before the bottle was found. It stunned everyone. Could Claire have lived far longer than assumed? Was she still alive when the first letter was recovered? Suddenly, the case was no longer just about loss. It was about the possibility of survival. Authorities reopened trail access to a region previously deemed unstable due to mudslides. It was near this area that a hiker claimed, back in 2018, to have heard a woman singing near a rocky ledge. He'd assumed it was a prank or someone camping illegally. But now, his description matched the exact coordinates near the burned ranger station. The region was treacherous, known for bear sightings, unstable cliffs, and deep sinkholes. Still, a dedicated team of wilderness rescue experts combed the area with new equipment: thermal drones, scent detection dogs, and even audio sensors. One drone picked up something strange, a faint heat signature near an outcropping of boulders. It was dismissed at first as a sun-warmed rock, but then it moved, just slightly. Teams rushed in. What they found was a small stone hollow beneath a dead tree. Inside were tattered blankets, a makeshift stove, and several weathered journals. And then silence. No person, no body, but something far more chilling. The final journal entry, written in uneven script, said, "The world is louder now. I hear them calling, but I'm not ready to return. Not yet." There was no date, no signature, just that eerie statement. Some said it had to be a prank, an elaborate hoax, but others weren't so sure. The handwriting was consistent with Claire's previous letters. Forensic linguists confirmed it matched her known style, which left only two possibilities. Either someone was impersonating her in the deepest parts of the Montana wilderness, or Claire Donovan had truly survived longer than anyone believed. The story gripped national media. News crews swarmed Glacier National Park. People began leaving flowers near the ranger station ruins. One man traveled from Colorado to carve her name into a wooden bench overlooking a lake. "She made me believe in hope again," he said to a reporter. Claire's face appeared on T-shirts, murals, and even candle vigils in cities far from the park. And still, no trace of her, no footage, no sightings. Only a lingering presence, a growing myth, and the unmistakable feeling that somewhere, deep within the vast expanse of forest, a woman once lost had decided to stay hidden. Maybe she didn't want to be found. Or maybe she was watching. The national spotlight had now fully shifted to Claire Donovan, not as a victim, but as a mystery. TV anchors debated whether she had survived for years on her own, or if someone had helped her. Online forums exploded with theories. Some believed Claire had suffered trauma and deliberately chosen isolation. Others claimed she had joined an off-grid community in the Rockies. One popular theory even suggested she'd never left the park at all and had been silently living within it, a ghost in the forest. Park rangers, however, remained cautious. While they acknowledged the evidence, handwritten notes, the photograph, the survival supplies, they couldn't confirm a timeline. The burned ranger station had no intact surveillance, and the items were too degraded for precise dating. But one object reignited the investigation in a way no one expected: a rusted key found beneath the floorboards of the cabin. It was small, stamped with the number 214. Investigators assumed it was for a locker or storage unit, but it didn't match any known inventory in the park. A curious volunteer with the Forest Service posted the image online, asking if anyone recognized it. Days later, an elderly man in Kalispell sent an email. He said he used to work at a bus depot that closed in 2008, and their lockers were numbered exactly like that. The station had been abandoned, but the structure still stood, scheduled for demolition. Authorities rushed to the site. It took hours to find locker 214. Most were rusted shut, but this one was oddly clean, as if it had been recently touched. Inside, wrapped in layers of canvas, was a small tin box. And in that box was a ring. Not just any ring, it was Nathan's wedding band. Initials C+N were still visible on the inside. Alongside it was a final note, short, no greeting, no goodbye, just a few sentences, written with the same unmistakable hand. I couldn't carry it anymore. It belonged to him, not me. I was only ever meant to follow, but now I walk alone. For the first time in over a decade, the focus returned to Nathan. Had Claire lost him on the trail? Had she witnessed something so painful she chose to vanish? Or had something happened to him that led her down this path of solitude? Forensic teams examined the ring and note. Both showed signs of recent handling, less than a year old, which meant someone had been in that abandoned depot sometime in the last 12 months. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses was checked, but the building's location was too remote. No cameras, no witnesses. It was as if the ring had appeared on its own. News of the ring discovery went viral again. Candlelight vigils were held not only for Claire, but now for Nathan too. Old college friends came forward, sharing stories of how devoted the couple had been. One classmate said, "If Claire is alive, then I know one thing for sure. Whatever happened out there broke her in a way no one can understand." The park itself became a strange kind of shrine. Visitors left painted stones near the trailhead. Children wrote letters addressed to Claire. And yet, as summer turned to fall, no further clues emerged. Only silence, stillness, and questions. Did Claire survive out of strength or guilt? Was she hiding from the world or from herself? And most haunting of all, why leave the ring now, after so many years? The discovery of Nathan's wedding ring in the abandoned bus depot shifted public interest once again, but not in the way investigators hoped. Instead of leading to answers, it opened a floodgate of new speculation. Online sleuths began mapping Claire's supposed movements, comparing every known detail of the trail, the ranger station, the photographs, and now the depot. Reddit threads exploded with theories ranging from secret cults in the Rockies to witness protection programs. Some believed Claire had been on the run not from tragedy, but from someone or something. The note that came with the ring only deepened the mystery. I was only ever meant to follow, but now I walk alone. It didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like loss, like someone who had been left behind, not someone who left. But if Nathan had survived past their disappearance date, where was he? If he hadn't, what exactly had Claire witnessed that drove her into hiding for years? The FBI re-entered the case officially, citing the ring as new physical evidence. Old interviews were reviewed, including those with the original park staff and search teams from 2006. A retired ranger, now living in Oregon, was recontacted. He remembered something odd from the original search. There was a footprint, he said, just one. A man's boot print, leading away from the area where they found the last signs of Claire and Nathan. It wasn't logged because it was too far off the search grid. We thought it was from a hiker who wandered in after the fact. That footprint, never followed up, became the next point of focus. A new team was dispatched to that side of the mountain, an area notoriously unstable with shifting rock faces and steep drop-offs. Using modern drone technology and thermal imaging, they mapped the terrain with more precision than was possible in 2006. And that's when something unexpected appeared, a collapsed shaft, partially obscured by vegetation and debris. It wasn't on any park maps. It didn't match any documented trail or mine. But the geological structure suggested it had been there for decades, maybe longer, Some believed it had once been used during early prospecting efforts in the region, then forgotten. The entrance was blocked by a rock slide, but not entirely. One narrow gap allowed access for a small search robot. The device maneuvered through the passage, transmitting video in real time. Dust, roots, empty cans, torn cloth, then bones. Not a full skeleton, but fragments, a partial femur, a rib, and something that didn't belong to nature at all. A pair of prescription eyeglasses, cracked but intact, bearing a tiny engraving on the inside arm. N.R. Donovan. Nathan's full name. The glasses were confirmed through dental records and prescription logs to have belonged to Nathan Donovan. After 17 years, he had finally been found. Not whole, not in a way anyone hoped, but found. The shock rippled through the nation. Memorials were held again. Candlelight vigils returned. But the attention was no longer romantic. Now it was forensic. Now the question shifted from "Where is Claire?" to "Why did Claire survive and Nathan didn't?" And perhaps most chilling, did Claire leave him there? Or did she escape something Nathan couldn't? Investigators couldn't determine the cause of death. No visible trauma, no animal markings. It was as if he had simply stopped existing within that narrow cave. Had he fallen? Had he hidden there willingly? No one could say. But one fact was certain. Claire had walked away. Whether she ran or wandered, she left that place. Alone. With Nathan's remains identified, the case took on a colder tone. The romantic mystery that had once captured hearts nationwide now felt eerily incomplete. Public fascination turned to suspicion. Why hadn't Claire reported what happened? If she had survived for even a short while after his death, why hadn't she told anyone? Why the cryptic note in the bottle? Why the decades of silence? One retired profiler from Quantico came forward, offering his perspective. If Claire survived, she was either traumatized beyond recovery or protecting something. Theories abounded. Some believed she had intentionally vanished to escape scrutiny. Others thought she had been abducted and later released. A darker corner of the internet speculated that she had caused Nathan's death, whether by accident or choice, and fled out of guilt. But there was no evidence of foul play, no sign of struggle. Nothing beyond the incomplete skeleton, the scratched glasses, and the isolated cave that had swallowed a man whole. Claire's family remained mostly silent. Her parents had passed away in the years following the disappearance. A cousin in Wyoming, who hadn't spoken to Claire in over a decade before 2006, was interviewed by local press. Claire was always intense, curious, smart, but something changed in her last year before the wedding. She'd stopped responding to emails. She'd grown distant. That distance seemed to define everything now, as if Claire had been pulling away from the world long before she and Nathan vanished. Meanwhile, forensic teams examined the collapsed shaft. There were signs someone had lived near the entrance, if only briefly. Charred wood, fabric tied between tree branches, perhaps as shelter, a broken watch still ticking when exposed to sunlight. It was old tech, solar-powered and cracked, just like the glasses. Could Claire have camped there before leaving? If so, why hadn't she gone for help? The nearest ranger station was only 6 miles downhill. Not an easy trek, but possible. One expert in wilderness psychology proposed a chilling theory. Some people, when overwhelmed, experience what's called dissociative fugue. It's a mental state where they may forget who they are or feel compelled to disappear. If Claire experienced that, she may not have even known what happened to Nathan. The final days in the wilderness could have been a blur of fear, hunger, shock, or, perhaps, something else happened entirely. Then, out of nowhere, another letter surfaced. This time, not found in a bottle or carved in wood, but in a post office, mailed from a town in Washington state, dated just 4 years prior. It was addressed to Claire's former roommate from college, who had long moved out. The letter had sat in the forwarding pile for years. When opened, it contained just one sentence typed, "I remember the snow." No return address, no signature, just a town stamp from Winthrop, a small mountain community near the Cascades. Investigators rushed to the area. They canvassed hotels, hostels, campgrounds, showed old photos, interviewed rangers and librarians and market clerks. No one remembered Claire, or if they did, they weren't talking. But one campground manager recalled something strange. There was a woman, back in 2019. She kept to herself, paid in cash, said her name was L. L, short for Claire. Or a coincidence? She had stayed in a remote cabin for 2 weeks, left suddenly after a lightning storm. The only thing she left behind, a page torn from a guidebook, highlighting hiking trails in Glacier National Park. It was as if, after all this time, Claire had been circling back. Not just physically, but emotionally, reliving something she couldn't escape. The lead in Washington reignited the case, but it also left investigators chasing shadows. If Claire had really been in Winthrop, why leave a breadcrumb pointing back to Glacier? Was it a cry for help, or was she taunting those who had spent nearly 2 decades searching? Psychologists who studied long-term survival cases suggested another possibility. Claire may have been reliving trauma in cycles, returning to reminders of the park, retracing old routes, never truly leaving the wilderness behind. One FBI agent described it as a spiral of memory. She couldn't move forward, so she kept circling the same wound. The page torn from the guidebook was sent to forensic labs. Tiny smudges of DNA were lifted from the edges, but the sample was degraded, insufficient for confirmation. Still, early testing suggested it was female. That was enough to keep hope alive. Meanwhile, journalists descended on Winthrop. They interviewed locals, pieced together timelines, and found a woman who swore she'd seen Claire. Her name was Margaret, a retired teacher. She claimed a gaunt, quiet woman came into her knitting circle once in 2019. She introduced herself as Elle, sat silently, and left halfway through without a word. Margaret remembered her eyes. They were tired, she said, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to speak. Investigators couldn't prove the story, but it aligned with the campground report. The trails seemed warm again, but then it went cold. Years passed. No new notes, no new bottles, only silence. Until the storm drain. In 2022, road workers in a small Montana town south of Glacier unclogged a storm drain after heavy rains. Inside, stuck between roots and mud, was a necklace, a simple silver chain with a charm, the letter C. Testing confirmed it had been submerged for years. But the chain was identical to one Claire's sister swore she wore before the trip. Was it hers, or just coincidence? Public reaction was fierce. News outlets ran with the headline, "Claire's necklace found." Vigils reignited. Online forums dissected every angle. Skeptics argued it was too convenient, planted to keep the story alive. Believers said it was the final clue Claire had left, her last desperate signal. For Claire's surviving relatives, it was torture. Her cousin spoke on television. "Every time something surfaces, we hope, and every time we're left with more questions." The necklace did one thing, however. It forced authorities to reopen portions of the park for renewed searches. And in doing so, they uncovered something no one expected. Deep in a thicket, a hiker stumbled upon remnants of another lean-to. This one older, more decayed. Among the debris was a tin can, blackened by fire, and scraps of fabric sewn into crude patches. On one scrap, in faded ink, was a word: "Listen." The fragment was sent to labs, confirmed as human handwriting, but inconclusive on authorship. Some said it matched Claire's journals. Others doubted, but the effect was the same. The narrative shifted. It wasn't just about a couple vanishing anymore. It was about messages, symbols, fragments of someone lost between two worlds. Survivors and victims blurred. Claire Donovan had become more than a missing person. She was now a legend, part ghost story, part survival tale. Parents told their children not to stray from paths in Glacier, whispering, "Remember Claire." And still, the unanswered question lingered. Was she leaving behind these tokens herself, or had someone else been weaving the trail all along? The necklace, the scraps, the whispers, they all pointed to one truth. If Claire was alive, she wasn't ready to be found. If she was gone, she wanted her story to never end. In the winter of 2023, the Glacier National Park case took an unexpected turn when a group of documentary filmmakers from Oregon requested permission to shoot a series on unsolved wilderness disappearances. Among the stories they intended to cover was the case of Claire and Daniel Donovan. With access granted, they arrived with drones, thermal imaging equipment, and a desire to find something, anything, that the previous teams might have missed. One of the filmmakers, Lena Brooks, became particularly invested in the Donovan story. She'd grown up hearing whispers about it, remembering her parents talking about the couple who vanished into the trees. On the second week of filming, Lena followed an old game trail while testing drone footage. That's when she spotted something odd. A section of boulders near a steep incline partially collapsed. The drone's camera caught glints of metal, something reflecting light where nothing should. She marked the coordinates and called park rangers. What they found at the site reignited the investigation. Beneath the collapsed rocks, partially buried and covered by pine needles and soil, was a rusted aluminum container. A storage box, military grade, the kind used for food preservation during survival training. It had initials carved into the lid, CD. Inside the box were remnants: an old flannel shirt, 2 unopened protein bars, a cracked compass, and most chilling of all, a journal sealed inside a plastic bag. The pages were soaked on the edges but legible, and the handwriting, identical to Claire's. Investigators held their breath as forensic analysts confirmed it. Claire Donovan had written the entries. The journal began just 2 weeks after the couple's disappearance in 2006. It described the first days after getting lost, attempts to backtrack, and Daniel's decision to climb a ridge in search of signal. He never returned. The entries grew more fragmented, emotionally raw, filled with fear, then anger, and eventually a kind of acceptance. She wrote of building shelters, rationing food, and losing the sense of time. One chilling entry read, "I don't think they're looking anymore. I hear planes, but I stay hidden. I don't want to be a story. I want to be a person again." That line devastated readers when it was later published, but it was the final pages that caused the most controversy. The last entry, dated over a year after the disappearance, simply read, "Someone else is here." And then, in shaky handwriting, "If you find this, please don't stop listening." That was all. No signature, no explanation. Theories exploded. Had Claire encountered another lost traveler? A recluse? A threat? Or was it the breakdown of her mental state after months in solitude? Psychological experts debated endlessly on news panels. Survivalists analyzed her strategies, praising her endurance. Yet the core mystery remained. What happened after that last journal entry? Did she finally leave the park? Was she taken? Or did she choose to vanish entirely, perhaps guided by someone or something she met in the wilderness? One ranger, who had searched for Claire years earlier, said it best. That park doesn't just hold people. Sometimes it keeps their stories alive in the trees, the rocks, and the silence. In the aftermath of the journal's discovery, the Glacier National Park Visitor Center created a memorial exhibit. It included photos, maps, and a replica of Claire's handwriting. A glass case held the actual journal, open to that haunting final entry. Visitors left notes, prayers, and even drawings. One child wrote, "Dear Claire, I hope you're not scared anymore." Yet despite the growing awareness, one detail continued to nag at investigators. The aluminum box had been sealed with fresh tape. It wasn't weathered like the other contents. Someone had preserved it, and not recently. But who? The revelation about the sealed aluminum box stirred quiet panic among park officials. If the tape was recent and the contents preserved intentionally, it meant someone had returned to the site. Someone who knew exactly where the box was. That single fact reignited every theory that had long been buried along with the Donovan case. Did Claire survive and come back? Was someone else involved all along, watching from the shadows? For weeks, forensic teams combed the area. Soil samples were taken. Footprints had long since vanished, but broken branches and disturbed moss near the rock pile hinted at human presence no more than a year prior. Theories spiraled. Some believed Claire had eventually escaped the park, but chose a life off the grid. Others believed she had met someone out there, perhaps another recluse living deep in the forest, but the darker theories suggested the possibility of a hidden threat. Could there have been a third person involved from the beginning? A stranger they encountered after getting lost? The public's obsession with the case reached new heights when a photograph surfaced online. It showed a woman, thin, cloaked in an oversized jacket, standing outside a convenience store in Libby, Montana. Her face was partially obscured, but when compared to Claire's earlier photos, the resemblance was undeniable. Facial recognition analysis yielded a 68% match. That wasn't conclusive, but it wasn't dismissible either. The photo had no timestamp. Security cameras in the area had long since been erased. No one remembered the woman. She vanished after buying a pack of trail mix and a single bottle of water. The label on the bottle, Glacier Spring. Whether it was Claire or not, the mystery deepened. The family, especially Claire's younger brother Jeremy, begged her, through public letters and online posts, to come home if she was alive. "You're not a ghost," he wrote. "You're my sister. Please let us know you're safe." No response ever came. And then, a final twist. In late summer 2024, a group of hikers reported something strange just outside the northern boundary of the park. They'd found a rusted trail marker, newly painted in faint white letters. "Listen." Just that. Nothing more. Rangers investigated but found nothing else unusual. No campsite, no prints, no DNA, just that one word. And it echoed. Online forums erupted. Was it Claire? A message from someone else? A warning? Some thought it symbolic, referencing Claire's final journal entry. Others believed it was a hoax, but for those who had followed the story from the beginning, it was something deeper, a call to pay attention. To the signs we ignore, the voices we dismiss, the silences we leave unexplored. In the years that followed, the case became more than a tragedy. It became a legend. College students wrote theses on the psychological breakdowns in isolation. Artists painted tributes to Claire's resilience. Documentaries and podcasts dissected every theory. Yet the question remains, what truly happened to Claire and Daniel Donovan? Was it nature that claimed them? Or something else, something unexplainable, lingering in the vast, unforgiving silence of Glacier National Park? One final note rests at the end of the park's memorial exhibit, written by an anonymous visitor on a weathered card. Not all disappearances are endings. Some are transformations. Claire, wherever you are, I hope you found peace in the wild. And perhaps in the end, that's the answer. Not a solution, but a space where silence holds stories and a single message in a bottle can ripple through time, reshaping everything we thought we knew.